Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of IBD Heal, a podcast brought to you by High Carb Health. I'm your host, Shukul, and today we're joined by Robyn Chuter. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Shukul, it's great to be back.
Now, keen viewers will notice that Robyn is back for a second time. She was on the podcast a couple of years ago, I believe, talking all about the microbiome. We had this amazing microbiome masterclass, which we covered in depth, so many different topics, and we'll link that video in the description so you can watch it after you watch this one. But Robyn, we're very excited to have you on again because today we're going to deep dive into our human ancestry and what we were designed to eat, right? And it's become a big topic recently, hasn't it? Especially if you look at the carnivore communities and the heavy meat eating communities that talk about the fact that humans are carnivores apparently now. And that we are designed to only eat meat. We're designed to only eat meat, and our whole evolution or our history revolves around us eating only meat. So let's see whether that's true. And I'd like to kind of start off on a broader macro level, talking about the main topic of today's session, which is that did we evolve to eat meat? Should we start there?
Yeah, I think, well, I know for a fact because they speak about it, that people like archaeologists and paleoanthropologists and, evolutionary geneticists, they're pretty flummoxed by this idea that humans evolved to eat meat or humans, well, certainly that humans evolved on a meat-heavy or a meat-centric and certainly a meat-exclusive diet. Like, that is news to the people who work in these fields of science, okay? When I say news, I mean it's BS. So, yeah. Now, I suppose we're going to have to grapple with this wording of humans were designed to eat meat, okay? Immediately that lands you in hot water because, if you take a creationist point of view, well, God actually designed human beings to eat fruit. He plunked humans down in the Garden of Eden and said, look, dudes, here's your plants, here's your leaves, here are your seeds, go to town, have fun. Okay, so if you take the design route, then humans were actually designed to eat plants. But seriously, and sorry, when I say seriously, obviously, there are people who do read that as literal truth, and well, who am I to judge, right? From an evolution point of view, there's no such thing as design in evolution. Design just isn't a thing. There's adaptation. Okay, so are humans adapted to eat meat? Are we adapted to eat meat? Well, culturally, we're certainly adapted to eat meat. And humans are very distinct from other creatures in that our culture is a significant aspect of our evolution. Okay, so there's a small handful of other species or groups of species in which culture plays a significant role in shaping evolution. For example, elephants have culture, wolves have culture, and there's a group of birds that are called corvids, including crows and ravens. They have culture, okay? Which means that there's extensive teaching of the young by the parents, and isolated subgroups of these animals can have very different cultures involving very different transmitted behaviors to other isolated groups of the exact same species. Okay, so when I talk about our culture adapting us to eat meat, yes, human cultures, primitive human cultures were without any doubt. Let's see. They were, you wouldn't exactly say they were organized, but they certainly prioritized the hunting of meat and the consumption of meat. Hence why you see all of those cave paintings, featuring the men, spearing the animals or hunting them with bows and arrows and so on and so forth. Okay, so culturally, we're adapted to eat meat. Physiologically, humans can certainly tolerate meat in the diet. Clearly, I mean, most people on Earth eat meat and they don't drop dead from it. So we have some degree of biological adaptation to it. Now, but the question for you and I, because we're in the business of helping people to optimize their health, is the cultural and limited biological adaptation to eating meat actually conducive to human health? Now, that's an extremely complex question to answer. We do have decades of accumulated large-scale evidence that the higher the proportion of calories that come from animal foods in the human diet, the greater the risk of chronic disease, and in general terms, the shorter the lifespan. And the converse is true. The more plant-centered, the more plant-rich a population's diet, the lower the risk of chronic degenerative disease like diabetes and coronary heart disease and ulcerative colitis, right? The lower the prevalence of all of these conditions and the longer the lifespan. Now, what we don't have is definitive evidence from large-scale follow-up studies that eliminating animal products from the diet altogether is optimal for human health. We do not have that evidence. We do not have compelling evidence to make that claim. And I'm really clear about that when I talk to people about this. Now, when you are dealing with people whose health is really poor, as you do obviously with inflammatory bowel disease and with me with, well, everything else. Actually, I do predict with inflammatory bowel disease, but just all the various and sundry conditions that I deal with. What I have found is that the further people go in the direction of eliminating animal products from their diet, the better their health. Okay. Now, can I say definitively that they would all be better off if they were 100% plant-based? No, I can't, right? Because I've got to stick to the science, but that is certainly my observation. Okay, so why would it be then? Why would it be the humans culturally prioritized securing animal products initially through hunting and later through domestication and celebrated it and had ceremonies around it and made art around it and made a big deal around it, right? Why would it be that humans really celebrated the acquisition and consumption of meat if it is not, quote unquote, good for us? And the answer to that is good for us in what context? Okay, so in the context of your food supply is very marginal, it might be some season where your usual source of plant foods is not abundant, it's dry season perhaps, something like that, and you're really short of calories, and you manage to bring down an antelope or something like that, happy days. Everyone gets fed, everyone's happy. And that's a very energy-dense source of food. So in the context of people who were on the very edge of nutrition for a good part of their lives, you better believe that they celebrated that bringing down the antelope, right? Would have been music and dancing and around the campfire that night because people were hungry and now they've got something to eat. However, when you're looking at the situation that we have now where there is too much damn food, people eat too much. There's too many calories. The calorie supply per human in Australia and the UK and the US and everywhere in the Western world, really, the calorie supply per person is wildly in excess of our needs. We have too much food floating around. And we also live a lot longer. That's the other thing. So it's really, I mean, how do you even calculate average life expectancy in the Paleolithic era? We have no clue. You can gather the skeletons of remains that you find, and you can analyze them for age, which archaeologists are pretty good at doing, and you can figure out you calculate a rough average of how long people lived. Okay, so you got really high infant mortality rates. You would have had pretty high maternal mortality rates, so women dying either in pregnancy or in childbirth, and of course you've got really high rates of death due to accident, hunting accidents, and also due to intertribal warfare or hostility, and just infections. You have an accident with a spear that you meant to throw at an animal, you get an infection, you don't have any antibiotics, the wound gets horribly infected and you die, right? So because of all of that, we can surmise that a relatively small number of people in Paleolithic times made it to advanced old age. Okay, most of them were going to be, off the planet. They were going to have shuffled off their mortal coil before they got to 70 for sure. It would have been a small number of people who made it past then. They just got lucky. But the idea that people were living extremely long, that most Paleolithic people were leading very long lives, is just not borne out by the evidence. now what we're facing is most people want to live a good long life. There are some people in Silicon Valley who want to live forever, but they're fruitcakes, right? Most people would just they fancy the idea of getting to 90s, maybe even 100 if they're ambitious, but in really good health. So can we draw anything from our Paleolithic ancestors about making it to 90 in good health? No, no, we can't. And why was introducing meat into the human diet good for our survival as a species? Because if you are a population that is on the edge nutritionally, and that is your diet supplies you with very marginal source of calories, you're just barely getting enough much of the time. Your principal object in life is to get enough food to eat so that you survive and you're able to reproduce, especially if you're a female. Okay, like you've got to invest a lot of calories into growing them male babies. They are extremely energy expensive, right? That's your main priority. If eating meat gives you more calories to survive to reproductive age and then reproduce yourself, that is good for the species. Is it good for the individual if the individual desires healthy longevity? No, clearly it's not. And when I say clearly it's not, I mean going back to the large-scale human evidence.
Absolutely. I'm just going back on hunting and things like that, You mentioned that it was done at a time where calories were scarce and that it was celebrated because it saved their lives, basically, when there was, when there were seasons where food wasn't abundant, and food meaning plants. Because, put it this way, why would you risk your life to try and go maybe for days to hunt an animal who can kill you very easily, right? And just do that for fun when you've got other food at home. And this is like a survival, you're not going there for just for fun and to play a game with these animals, in the wild. And so, of course, these people were incredibly brave people, and that's why they're, that's like they're like the movie stars of the ancient times, And so obviously they were really celebrated in a big way.
I'm so glad you raised this point, Shukul. It's incredibly important to ponder the significance of this. So, okay, if anthropologists have gone and lived with various, hunter-gatherer tribes or groups in various locations throughout the world. And what they have observed is that there is an extremely gendered distribution of food gathering and food production tasks in every culture that you look at. So in every culture that you look at, men hunt. And women might be involved in trapping small game, making traps, fish nets, that sort of thing, okay? But when it comes to the more dangerous stuff or the stuff that involves traveling long distances, it's always men, okay? Now, in all of these cultures, women also produce the bulk of the calories. And the bulk of the calories do come from plant foods. And yes, occasionally, once again, the trapping of small animals. But the bulk of the calories come from women's food production. And the bulk of those calories come from carbohydrate sources. So especially in Africa, where the general consensus is that is where, anatomically modern humans came out of. We came out of Africa. That's where Homo sapiens developed. And the bulk of the calories there are gathered by women for at least most of the year, and those calories come in the form of what are called underground storage organs, or USOs, mostly tubers. There's also corms and rhizomes and roots, but mostly it's tubers. And so these tubers exist, under the ground. So again, they're underground storage organs of plants. The plant makes glucose through photosynthesis and then takes it down into the underground storage organs, like the rhizome, to store energy. And so women's jobs in these cultures, they spend most of their days with digging sticks, and they go around digging up these tubers. Okay, and then cooking them. We'll get to the role that fire played in human development in a little bit, but that's what the women do. And these tubers, I mean, look, let's face it, they don't taste that spectacular. They're pretty boring. They're very fibrous. They're very tough. You kind of have to chew them up for a bit and then like spit out the fiber because they're really super fibrous. And so you can understand, like, it's pretty exciting days when the men bring home a gazelle or a springbok or something like that. Okay, or when they bring home honey, which is something else that's used as a major source of calories in hunter-gatherer tribes where it's available, which is most places actually, certainly in the more equatorial latitudes. Honey's so if you look at the food, at the calorie sources of the Hadza people in northern Tanzania, and they've been really extensively studied. Honey actually makes up an incredible proportion of people's calories, especially the men. It's not available all year round. Okay, but when it's available, the men just hoe into it and they actually tend not to bring it home. They just go out on these hunting trips, and when they find, like a wild hive, they just guzzle the stuff. They might drink like a whole liter in one go because it tastes really freaking good compared to these tubers. So, yeah, of course, people appreciate dietary variety when all they've got is damn tubers. Not tubers again, Mum. You can just imagine little cave kids going, "Oh, not tubers again." When's Dad going to bring home a bison or something? Sorry, I've just gone off track there. We were talking about the value. So given that women produce the bulk of the calories, and hunting, as you say, is a dicey business, and again, anthropologists who've lived with hunter-gatherers will tell you that even with the most sophisticated hunting technology, the bow and arrow, the strike rate is actually pretty low, and more often than not, the men come home empty-handed. However, when they do come home with something, it is effectively a sorting process among the men. Now, this is a whole other field, and so I'll be brief about this because it's off the topic that we want to discuss today. But women are generally hypergamous. That is, they like to marry or partner up. Okay, and so when men go out and hunt, there is a sorting process in that, and so the women stay back home and then they find out who was the most successful hunter, and that helps them figure out who's the most high value mate. Okay, so for the men, it's like, well, if I risk my my well-being, if I risk getting a sprained ankle or having some animal gore me with its horns or whatever, but as a consequence of that, I get the esteem of the men, which is a big deal, and I also get my pick of the hot chicks, which is a super big deal. You better believe men are going to be, they're going to be out there. They're going to be out there, looking for all the antelope they can bring down. Okay, so again, humans are, our cultural evolution plays as big of a role in our evolutionary process as our genetic evolution, and that's the role that the hunting has played in our past.
Yeah. So let's look at the human diet around the Paleolithic times, right? So, apparently we were guzzling lots and lots of meat, and that was a predominant part of our diet. But we looked through some of the research, and it shows us that we were consuming about 100 grams of fiber a day plus. Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk to the audience a little bit about what the diet was like and how did they manage to eat that amount of fiber. And if you're eating that amount of fiber, how much room does that leave to eat animal foods or meat? Right? Because 100 grams of fiber, you better believe it, that's a lot of food. And
I'm sure I don't need to tell your audience this, right? They already know this, but there ain't no fiber in animal products. So if you're getting 100 grams of fiber a day, quite right, you're eating a heck of a lot of plants. Now, in case anyone's wondering, well, how does Shukul know that Paleolithic humans ate 100 grams of fiber a day? He wasn't back there. Does he have a time machine? No, he doesn't. But Shukul knows perfectly well about the study of coprolites, which are fossilized species. Yes, there is a whole sub-branch of archaeology that involves the analysis of fossilized poop, paleo poop. And it's from this. It's from analysis of basically turds, fossilized turds that were found in Paleolithic sites that archaeologists can extrapolate that, humans were eating, estimates range from 100 to 150 grams of fiber a day. Okay, so I'm just going to go through through the evidence for plant food consumption, and then I'll come back and answer your question, I promise. Okay, so we've got the evidence from the paleo poop. We also have evidence of plant eating, because one of the other branches of well, actually, it's paleoarchaeology, I should say, is the analysis of the fossilized dental plaque or dental calculus, and in the dental calculus, the scientists actually find the remains of a wide variety of plants. Okay, so there's very, very clear evidence that both Homo sapiens and our precursor species, and actually Homo neanderthalis, the Neanderthals, were eating plant foods. We know because they had the plant remains in their dental calculus or plaque. And then there's one other feature of humans which distinguishes us from the primates, to which we're most closely related, and that is the multiple copies of a starch digesting gene called amylase in our genome. So we have many, many more copies than any other kind of animal, because other animals that eat a carbohydrate-rich diet do not eat a starch-rich diet, okay? That is a feature of the human diet. It's a heavy reliance on starch. And so we have multiple copies of this amylase gene in our genome, and we produce amylase, a starch digesting enzyme, in our saliva. That's actually quite unique to us. And we also produce amylase in our pancreatic juice. That's not unique to us. You want to guess what other animal has amylase in its pancreatic juice, Shukul? Dogs.
Oh, really?
Dogs.
Oh,
Wolves do not. Wolves do not produce amylase in their pancreatic juice, but dogs do, because dogs co-evolved with humans. And so
course.
humans are roasting tubers on the fire, and they kind of finish off the tuber and throw it over there, and the dog goes, and go and eat the remains of the tuber. Okay, like dogs do. They'll eat the remains of anything, including really disgusting things. Just ask my dogs. So we know that humans were eating starch, and I'll get to the role that starch played in our evolution as a species in a bit. But so that's the evidence that we have now. So you asked the question, what were they eating? They initially, of course, when we were still much more primate-ish, so there's this sort of long sequence of species, which I think is outlined really beautifully in this book by Richard Wrangham, called Catching Fire. So he traces the development of humans off from a branch off the common tree that we share with primates. And so there was Australopithecus, and then there was, if I remember rightly, was Homo habilis, and then Homo erectus, and then Homo sapiens. And I'm missing out a couple of species in the middle there, but that's generally the progression. And so back when we were much more primate-y, the majority of carbohydrate obtained in the diet of those pre-human species was from fruit. Fruit, to a very limited extent, leaves of plants, but they're actually very low in carbohydrates. So it's mostly fruit. And then as humans, as proto-humans progressed into pre-humans, and then eventually into humans, Homo sapiens, well, that progression coincided with the harnessing of fire. And again, that's what this book is really all about. So the subtitle is How Cooking Made Us Human. All right. And so it was through the use of through the harnessing of fire, the ability to control fire, the ability to keep fire going after, say, a random lightning strike or a forest fire, the ability to start fire and then use fire for cooking purposes. That is what literally shaped the human being. And when I mean literally shaped, I mean anatomically. Humans look like humans and not other primates, because cooking gave us the ability, or gave our ancestors the ability, to harness those underground storage organs or tubers. They are almost inedible raw, and not a very good source of energy. Okay, but if you dig them up and then you roast them on the fire, you gelatinize the starch. Now it can be digested down into glucose, and now you have this incredibly rich and very consistent source of glucose. And it's that steady supply of glucose that allows multiple anatomical and physiological changes to take place. One is that although the length of the human gut is much longer than that of carnivores and true omnivores like bears or pigs, it is shorter than that of other primates who eat exclusively raw food, and that is cooking. That is because cooking actually, in a sense, pre-digests food. And so you do not need quite as large a surface area to carry out digestion and absorption as if you're eating a raw plant-based diet. Okay, so the gut shrank, and there is a relationship between the gut size and surface area and the brain volume. And so the gut actually needs a hell of a lot of energy to run its operations. In other words, digestion is an energy consuming business. Okay. If you have a very large gut surface area, you've got to divert a lot of the body's energy to digestion. Now, if you shrink the gut surface area because you've somewhat simplified the digestive process, it's still more complex than that of carnivores. I want to stress that point. Okay, you still need a longer gut and a larger surface area to process even cooked plants than you do meat. Okay, which is why the shape and the length and the surface area of the human gut is so different from that of dogs and bears and cats, tigers and whatever. But that gut surface area and length is much smaller than that of, say, chimpanzees or gorillas. So as a consequence, the human pelvis and the rib cage got it doesn't flare out as much as you see in chimpanzees and gorillas. And chimps and gorillas have this big gut because their gut is essentially, a giant fermenting tank. So the human gut is more compact, and then that frees up energy to develop a big fat brain. Okay, and then you also need glucose to power that brain. Okay, so the ability of pregnant women to secure enough glucose to keep themselves and their growing fetus, that's actually pivotal to maintaining a successful pregnancy. And you know this because your wife has gone through this fun journey of motherhood twice. It is normal to become somewhat insulin resistant during pregnancy. That is a normal state of pregnancy. The mother becomes insulin resistant. Why? Because the glucose in her bloodstream is being rediverted away from her and to the needs of the baby. Okay, so you've got to have this constant supply of carbohydrate, glucose available to fuel the growing baby, and in particular the baby's brain and central nervous system. If you do not have that, the woman is likely to either lose the pregnancy or the baby will be, let's just say, less than viable when born.
That is fascinating. I'm just going to stop you there for a second. That is really fascinating. We're just going to go off on a tangent here because
I love tangents.
The pregnant woman becoming insulin resistant to a certain degree. That would explain the prevalence of gestational diabetes in humans that don't eat a diet low enough in fat to keep their blood sugar under control. Am I on the right track here?
You're 100% on the right track. So gestational diabetes is just when that natural state of pregnancy insulin resistance goes too far. Okay, so if you kind of cross that line because you don't have sufficient insulin sensitivity in your tissues, now you have gestational diabetes. And I've actually managed 2 cases of gestational diabetes in clients by pulling down the fat content of the diet. And so both of them were actually able to avoid insulin injections in the final stages of pregnancy.
Absolutely. And we know very clearly that insulin resistance is because there's too much intramyocellular lipid, which means there's too much fat inside the muscle cells. So these kind of carnivorous diets, which are extremely high in fat, are going to mean that basically everyone who's eating this way is guaranteed almost to be insulin resistant in some way or the other, right? And so,
Well, yeah.
yeah, I
Well,
mean,
we know that our keto and carnivore friends, or a huge portion of them, are indeed insulin resistant, because if you put them through a glucose tolerance test, they will just fail it every time. So they think that they're doing great because they maintain this very flat
yeah,
blood sugar curve. Well, yeah, like of course you are if you're not actually eating any carbohydrates. You do. That flat blood sugar curve does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that you are actually insulin sensitive. You're not. It's just that you're not challenging the system by putting carbohydrate in it.
yeah. And so that's really important because, you know, there's a constant dialogue around insulin, and we know that eating animal products and meat will give you the same kind of insulin spike as sugar, right? So it's
Yes.
not like you're avoiding
Indeed.
insulin spikes by eating meat or things like that. So you are putting your body and your pancreas under a big lot of stress by eating these types of diets, and you're also making your body much more insulin resistant, which means as soon as you try to introduce any carbohydrate into your diet again, and anyone who tries this diet, I urge you and I challenge you to try and eat some carbohydrate and tell me that you do not get a blood sugar spike to a significant
Yes.
degree, compared to someone like you and me who are very insulin sensitive and will not see significant spikes. You know, even if you're eating a huge amount of fruit. You know.
Absolutely, and I'm sure your audience is well familiar with the Mastering Diabetes guys, and Robbie and Cyrus both eat like 500 grams of carbohydrate a day because they tons and tons of tropical fruit, and they're both insulin sensitive as heck. Yeah, both of them really lean, tons of energy, blah blah blah. So
So yeah,
yes,
that's
indeed.
that's just a little side topic, but yes, insulin resistance is a real issue if you're eating a high fat diet like a carnivore diet or a keto diet or a paleo diet. That is a huge
And
issue for people following this.
100%. And look, once again, we have very large long-term cohort studies showing an extremely clear link between the amount of red meat that's consumed and the risk of type 2 diabetes. Okay, so we've got cohort studies like the Harvard studies, the health professionals and the nurses follow up. We've got I believe the AARP has looked at this. There are a number of cohort studies, and I can send you links to put in the show notes if you like. So there is really, really solid, consistent, convincing evidence that the more red meat you eat, the higher your risk of type 2 diabetes somewhere down the track. Now, if you're currently 25 and you go to the gym and you're like really lean and buff and whatever, and you're saying, oh, I don't have diabetes and I eat, half a cow a day. Well, good for you, mate. You do realize that type 2 diabetes isn't something that generally afflicts younger people. I mean, increasingly it is. But the fact that you do not have it now does not mean that you will not have it. And the longer you stick with this diet that is really extraordinarily inappropriate for human beings, the higher your risk. And if it ain't type 2 diabetes, it's going to be coronary artery disease, it's going to be dementia, or it's going to be an autoimmune or an autoinflammatory disorder like inflammatory bowel disease, which, as you know, again, we have really convincing evidence that the higher the red meat intake, the higher the risk of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis.
Well, animal protein has been proven to be the highest risk factor for IBD. You know,
Yes.
and the p-value was like less than 0.001, I think, something like that. You know, it's very, very, it's super confident that that's the case.
Yeah, that's right. We have an extremely high degree of confidence that that's not some grand chance finding.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we were kind of moving along the lines of talking about our ancient cultures. Now we've gone through our digestive tract, and as you also compared the human being to like a dog or a bear, and look at our nails and our dental structure, and the fact that we don't, I mean, I ask this question to people, like, if you're hungry and you see a rat walking past, you don't just suddenly instinctively want to jump on it and rip its head off with your teeth and drink the blood and all that. There's no like instinct for us, whereas if I saw a mango hanging from a tree, my instinct would be, yeah, I want to grab that and eat that, you know. So there's a lot of different things about us that determine the fact that that's not something we are
Yeah.
anatomically
And yeah, I mean,
made to do.
I would say you can't rule out the influence of culture. I mean, there are certain
Mm,
cultures that do eat rats, and again, I mean,
yeah.
if you're really starving, you might fancy a rat. But yes, I mean, that really needs to be taught. Whereas, let me
Yeah.
tell you, when I go walking my dogs in the morning and they see a kangaroo or an echidna, uh, their instinct is straight away, run. I mean, obviously, I've got to hold them back, which is more fun. Run at that roo, and they're not running at that roo to go, "Hello, roo." Like I'm standing there, going, "Oh my god, roos are magnificent." I'm just like
Mm,
admiring how the big male is the sentry for the mob. He's got some females, and they've got the joeys, and he's like standing up front, going, "You want to take me?" Like, so my instinct when I see a roo or a mob of roos is like, oh my god, they are such extraordinary, amazing creatures. I just love looking at them. My dog's instinct is to run up to them, attempt to jump on them, and rip their hide off and eat them. Also, when one of them when one of the roos, I mean, has unfortunately been hit by a car, and there's now a rotting wallaby corpse or a roo corpse on the side of the road, it stinks to high heaven, and I want to give it as wide a berth as possible. My dogs, on the other hand, are drawn to this fetid stench. And believe me, if you've never smelt a roadkill wallaby after about 2 days in the hot Queensland sun, oh, geez, it is rank. It is absolutely rank. And my dog's instinct is to head straight for that rotting corpse, and it's all I can do to hold them back from just diving in there and eating the remains of this rotting flesh. Oh, gross.
oh wow.
So yeah, we're really not attracted to flesh the way that a true carnivore or even a true omnivore like a bear, because if a bear saw roadkill like that, it would go eat it too. So we are culturally omnivores, we are behaviorally omnivores, but we don't have the let's just say the central nervous system adaptations. That is, our sense of sight and smell and taste is not geared to either fresh flesh or rotting flesh the way that a natural carnivore or omnivores is. And then if you look at us again physiologically, so let me go back to this issue of requiring glucose to run the brain and central nervous system. And as a matter of fact, even meat-eating animals actually require quite a lot of glucose to run their brains. So the brain is an energy expensive organ in any complex animal, including all mammals. So the brain needs glucose. Yes, it can run on other fuels. It can run on ketone bodies when we're short of glucose. It can run on fuels like lactate, but its preferred fuel is glucose, and this is true in all animals. Now, the way that animals that eat a very low carbohydrate diet produce glucose for the brain is through a process called gluconeogenesis. Now, I'm not going to beat your listeners over the head with a biochem lesson, but gluco means glucose. That's pretty obvious. Neo means new, and genesis, well, you're probably familiar with the Bible, creation. Okay, so gluconeogenesis is the creation of glucose from new materials, that is, from non-carbohydrate precursors. So animals that do not eat a carbohydrate-rich diet, like dogs and bears and cats, they make glucose from amino acids from the proteins that they eat, and glycerol, which is released from triglycerides, a storage form of fats, when those fats are released from fat stores and sent into the bloodstream. Okay, so now the process of gluconeogenesis requires a hell of a big liver. And so if you look at the relative size of the liver in true carnivores and true omnivores, the liver is huge compared to the liver in humans. I mean, humans got a pretty big liver, right? But you compare the size of our liver proportionate to the rest of our body to that of a bear or tiger or whatever have you, and our livers actually look pretty puny. So the other thing that you need is a tremendous capacity to excrete urea. So if most of your glucose produced through gluconeogenesis is coming from amino acids from protein, in order to release the carbohydrate precursors from the amino acid, you've got to clip off the amine group, which contains nitrogen. Again, sorry, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds on the biochem, but the difference between carbohydrates, fats, and amino acids is carbohydrates and fats contain only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Amino acids contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Okay, and the nitrogen is in the form of an NH3 group, which, when it's clipped off, is ammonia. Okay, so if you are an animal that relies on gluconeogenesis to produce enough glucose to run your old brainio, you've got to have a big fat liver to make all that new glucose, and also to process the ammonia so that it doesn't poison you, so that you can safely excrete it as urea. Okay, so, and this is why you see such high rates of kidney disease in people who eat very high meat diets, and why kidney foundations recommend that people who have advanced renal disease restrict their protein intake. Okay, because their kidneys simply cannot handle the excretion of urea. So there's just so many adaptations. I mean, there are literally just entire books that's solely devoted to this topic of all of the anatomical and physiological adaptations of human beings for certainly a plant-forward diet, a plant-rich diet, if not a plant-exclusive diet, because once again, we just don't have the science to support the case for 100% plant-exclusive diet as being necessary, or like the diet to eat if you want to have healthy longevity. Okay.
Yeah, and so just talking about the excretion of urea, like how does that affect a human compared to a bear? Like if you want to go into a state of gluconeogenesis, which some people say is the best way for us to power our brains, how does that affect the human body compared to like a lion or a bear or a tiger, for example? You
Well,
talked
I
about the
mean, we do.
kidneys.
Yeah, we just don't have the liver and renal and kidney capacity to keep this up over long periods of time. We can do it for short periods of time. And, for example, when a person elects to do a water-only fast, they will initially pass through a period of gluconeogenesis in the first couple of days of fasting, and then they'll move on into ketosis. And so, that can be managed for finite periods of time. But I mean, you only have to look at just how resistant humans are to going into ketosis to see that this is not a normal natural state for a human being. The human body fights to stay in this kind of glucose-centered metabolism. It doesn't even want to go into ketosis. It resists it. And as soon as you reintroduce any, smallest amount of carbohydrate into the diet, the body snaps right back out of ketosis and goes back into burning glucose. What does that tell you about what the human physiology is actually set up for? So and I do want to talk about the Inuit, because they always get brought up in these discussions. We should eat a carnivore diet because the Inuit. Okay, so righto. I mean, there's all sorts of things that I could say about the Inuit, like their short life expectancy, their extremely low fertility rate, their unbelievably high infant mortality rate. I mean, these people do not live the long, healthy lives that I assume most people want. But there is a very widespread mutation that has basically run right through the Inuit population. I'm not saying 100% of Inuit have this. Sorry, just in case your listeners are not familiar, although I'm sure most people are. The Inuit is what Westerners for a long time referred to as Eskimo. I understand that Inuit people actually hate that term and they find it insulting, so they call themselves the Inuit. I reckon we should, just to be polite. So the Inuit people have a very high prevalence of this particular mutation that makes them very highly resistant to going into ketosis. So even though they eat, at least for most of the year, an extremely low carbohydrate diet, and most of their calories come from fat and secondarily from protein, from amino acids, they're actually very resistant because of this genetic mutation to going into ketosis. That just goes to show you, if the most carnivore-ish human population in the world has a genetic mutation that prevents them from going into ketosis when they eat a really ketogenic diet, human body doesn't like being in ketosis. Certainly not as like the day-by-day state.
And talk about, so, I mean, if our human body was designed to run primarily on fat and protein like the Inuit population does, then these people should be the healthiest people alive, correct?
Yes.
What kind of health outcomes do you see in these populations?
Again, very short life expectancy. They do have rampaging rates of coronary heart disease, contrary to this popular myth that went on for years and years. The Inuit don't get heart disease. Actually, they do, and it's not just because they've westernized their diet. If you go back to records that were kept by very, very early white people who made contact with them, they did actually have extensive coronary artery disease. And in the remains of sort of ice mummies of Inuit people, Inuits who were, for example, buried by avalanche, like their igloo caved in or something like that, there is evidence of extensive coronary artery disease. So yes, these people do get heart disease. And like I say, very, very low fertility rates. Again, this is because, and their fertility was actually seasonal, and does seem to have been linked to the seasonal availability of carbohydrates. So it's only a couple of months out of the year when they can get carbohydrates because they can gather berries, and there's some, vegetation that grows when, in the 2 weeks of summer, when everything defrosts and there's actually plant material. They chew on birch bark and things like that. So their fertility was in other words, the women's ability to conceive, just to be more precise about that term. It was seasonal and linked to the seasonal availability of carbohydrate, and they had this thumping great infant mortality rate. So, this is not my definition of a successful human population. Now, kudos to them for figuring out how to live in an unbelievably hostile geography and climate. 10 out of 10 for just sheer freaking resilience and ingenuity. But is that the population that we should model ourselves after if we wish to live long, healthy lives? Yeah, nah. I don't think so.
Technically, if the carnivore diet crowd was correct, they should be a total blue zone, shouldn't they? When we compare them to these populations where we have the longest living people and the most amount of people that get to 100 and that have the most, healthy lives.
Yeah.
The blue zones are very, very high carbohydrate consumers.
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
So I guess that just proves it straight away. There's no population that's eating. Well, there is a population that's eating very high fat diet, and then they're nowhere near the health and longevity of a population that's eating a very high carbohydrate diet.
Yes.
So
yes. And let's just qualify that term carbohydrate. I loathe the term carbs. It makes me. It's like fingernails down the chalkboard. And I just showed my age because there's no such thing as chalkboards. But when I was a child, we actually had chalkboards. And if you scratched your fingernails on them, it made the most god-awful sound. So people, ex-Geners remember this. Everyone subsequent is like, what the hell is she talking about? It was a thing, believe me. Carbs. It's a stupid word. I really would like to expunge it from everybody's vocabulary, except I'm not the word police, so oh well. But obviously, there's a world of difference between the type of carbohydrate and the context of carbohydrate that we're going to get when we get an apple or a mango or a black bean or some rice or a potato or a sweet potato. There is just a world of difference between that and, some refined flour, refined sugar, what awful concoction that people call carbs. And doesn't it just drive you mad when people talking about eliminating carbs from their diet and you go, oh, what did you cut out? Well, I cut out pizza. Really? That's carb? I think you'll find most of the calories in that are from fat, actually. I cut out donuts, also mostly calories from fat. I cut out ice cream. Most of the calories in that are from fat. So tell me again about the carbs that you cut out, because what I heard you say was I cut out a bunch of sugar, of fat from my diet,
and
fat with
sugar.
enough sugar in it to... Yeah, fat with enough sugar in it so that you wouldn't gag on it. That's what that is.
100%. I actually made a video talking about how fructose has been conflated with fruit, because they did studies on high fructose corn syrup and showed that there were some issues with people's livers. And now fruit has fructose, so fruit must be exactly the same as high fructose corn syrup, right?
Yeah. I don't know. You live far more in the online world than me. I mean, that's largely a generational thing. Although partly I choose
the
to
video
stay
will
out
be
of
linked
that
below.
Yeah, I mean, it's just... I'm sorry, it's not fashionable to say this, but it's too damn stupid for me. I can't handle it. Like the low quality of the discourse, it just drives me insane. I don't want to interact with this. I don't want to interact.
I actually saw a video because someone brought it to my attention. I don't go looking for these videos. I'll be pulling. I've got a lot of hair. I want to keep it. And somehow with my deficient diet, I've got such an amazing head of hair, But anyway.
That is a damn fine head of hair you got. 10 out of 10 for quality hair.
But, like they were saying in this video that antioxidants are bad for you because they're part of the toxic air. It's like...
What?
Yeah. They're talking about how antioxidants are actually a bad thing.
I don't even know where to start with that. I'm not sure if I should.
Do you want to remove free radicals from your body or not? Do you want oxidative stress in your body?
Yeah, obviously, I am convinced that a lot of people in the online space who put these things out there, they don't actually believe what they're saying. I mean, they couldn't possibly. Is it possible that they could be that stupid? I guess it could, but it's probably not. I don't think they actually believe what they're saying. It's just clickbait, because look, the message of, what you need to do to be healthy, let me tell you, in order to be healthy, you need to eat more fruit and veg and whole grains and legumes and nuts and seeds. You need to move your body. You need to get out there and do various forms of physical activity. You need to get enough sun, but not so much that you burn. You need to get to bed on time. And it's a real added bonus if you've got people in your life that you love and something that you do that gives you a great sense of satisfaction, whether that's paid or unpaid, who cares, right? That's a pretty boring message. So how are you going to get clicks? You're going to get clicks if you say to people, fruit's bad for you. Really? I've been hearing all my life that fruit is bad for me. Oh, yeah. Well, that's because everything you've ever heard about nutrition is a lie. Oh, for God's sake. I tell my clients, do not click, just make it a policy. Do not ever click on anything that says, psst, everything that you've ever heard about X, is wrong, and the experts are all lying to you. Like, oh, for God's sake, it is so. Now, sorry, let me just clarify.
We need to clarify that in certain topics.
I am well aware that there is a well-deserved loss of trust in experts, and I share that. Okay, this does not mean that suddenly everything that is frankly just common sense, like eating fruit and veg, is good for you, just because the experts say that eating fruit and veg is good, does not mean that it is wrong. Okay, this is the fundamental cognitive error that people are making. I understand it, and I don't charge them for it. because I think you and I have chatted offline about just how many things we've begun to question in the last several years.
It's got to a point where they'll just dismiss any study, no matter what, just because it's a study done by experts.
Except studies that were funded by the meat industry.
Yeah, of course, I forget. Unless it supports their point of view.
If the meat industry or the egg industry or the prawn industry or the dairy industry funds it and finds that stuff is A-OK, we can talk about those studies. Everything else, though, is like, oh my God, conflict of interest. What, you don't think getting sponsorship from the Dairy Corporation or the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is a conflict of interest? I think you might need to look that up in the dictionary there, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
oh my goodness. Yep.
Look, I mean, I think, we've gone through a really wide variety of different topics today to try and explain to people that, yes, even though we did eat meat, it wasn't because it was the healthiest thing for us. As you said, it's a social adaptation, a cultural adaptation that we did in survival times that's now become glamorized because of that these people were the movie stars of their day, and that they did they took all the risks, and they did all the, they saved the village basically. So celebrate and paint about them and tell stories about them and celebrate them, and that cultural kind of adaptation.
Blokes got chicks. Let's not forget that part, because it's really, really critical. It's how blokes got chicks. Blokes have always wanted to get chicks. Nothing has changed. The way blokes get chicks is just different these days. Okay, so that part we can't leave out. There is one other thing that I want to say, and I'll keep this brief. And that is that the body composition of the wild game animals that our Paleolithic ancestors were hunting and eating is almost incomprehensibly different to the composition of animals that are consumed now. So I went to the trouble some years ago when I was writing my ketogenic diet series, which I hope you put some links to, because I put a lot of effort into that. So folks, please do read this. So I went to the trouble of finding a database of the body composition of wild game animals found in Africa. So things like, the impala and springbok and so forth. The percentage body fat, total body fat in these wild game animals was almost unimaginably low. So at the peak of the wet season, when they actually had a bit of fat on them, it was well under 10%. And in the dry season, when there was very little vegetation, their body fat percentage dropped to below 5% of carcass weight. These were, as I say, almost incomprehensibly low-fat animals. They were very lean because, man, do they move around a lot. So, your Joel Salletons will say, oh, my cattle, I move them from pasture to pasture and they only get grass, and so they're much leaner. His cows are total fatties compared to impala, springbok, and wildebeest and so forth. His cows are freaking obese, and the texture of the muscle meat is much softer in his animals, because he moves them around from pasture to pasture, so they walk from point A to point B. Right? If you ever watch those African migratory nature videos, these animals cover huge distances, and man, are they wiry. And then the other thing is that of that tiny percentage of the carcass weight that is actually fat, a really high proportion is omega-3 fat. And again, even if you're eating grass-fed beef, the omega-3 content is not nearly as high, because proportionately there's so much more saturated fat in these animals because they are far more sedentary. Okay, they're just fatter and they're lazier. Okay, because they're domesticated. So these paleo and carnivore guys who say that they're eating some kind of ancestral diet, no, you're not even close. Not even close.
once you get 100 grams of fiber a day, then you can start talking about ancestral diets.
Exactly. And then, as millennia from now, we'll find your fossilized paleo poop, and we'll have proof. Well, it
Yes.
won't be paleo poop. It'll be like neo poop, Neolithic poop.
Oh, hilarious. Well, thank you so much, Robyn. That was extremely insightful and actually backing out what you're saying with real information and evidence, and not just making it up because you felt like it, because it sounded cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's really, really fascinating to try and really understand the psychology, but also the physiology behind the human being and why we did the things we did, and how our bodies are, are made to function, right? And they are made primarily to function on plants, with the exceptional inclusion of meat during survival times. And I think that's
Right.
essentially, if we look at it that way, and we're not living in a time where food is scarce, so we've got an abundance of plants all the time, and we don't miss out on anything. We're not deficient on anything eating a plant-based diet. So I think that's, and then all the research tells us that the more plants we eat, the better our health is. So let's focus on primarily a plant-heavy diet as much as we can. And so
we also have this unbelievable diversity of plants that's available all year round. So that's a significant advantage for us. Yeah.
100%, 100%.
So I'll shoot you some papers, some papers that provide the background to what I was talking about, if you want to include those in the show notes. I mentioned Richard Wrangham's book, Catching Fire, about how the use of fire really shaped the anatomically and behaviorally modern human. And the other book that I'd really recommend is this Paleofantasy by Marlene. It covers a lot more than diet. It covers, all the sort of aspects of this kind of paleo carnivore bro culture, and just how far off base it is. But it does have a section on diet, and it's very, very good. So I hope interested listeners will follow up on those resources and just get yourselves informed about these matters, and just stop clicking on that clickbait. Okay, if you stop clicking on it, it doesn't work anymore.
100%. And if you want more information, please, there's a comment section down below. Ask questions about some of the things you've heard. Ask for evidence. Ask for proof.
Please,
of all
hit
this
me up.
happening. Please, myself, Robyn will be in the comments. We'll, if she doesn't see it, I'll let her know. And, we'll kind of try and get to the bottom of this. If you have any other topics around the carnivore community that you want, like, for example, there's things like anti-nutrients and antioxidants and like a more detailed dive into fiber. Oxalate dumping is something that they talk about, that we're dumping all these oxalates out of our body. That's why we've got all our symptoms.
I've done articles on phytates. I've done articles on lectins, antioxidants, anything that your audience is interested in or has heard
if you've got a suggestion for another video topic, Robyn and I are happy to sit down and go over the information and go over the research and explain to you how it actually works in the body. And not just something that's been made up and thought, hey, this is a great idea. Let's scare people into thinking lectins are bad and this kind of stuff. So,
oh my god!
So
nails on the chalkboard again.
So ask in the comments below, and we're more than happy to answer any of these questions that you guys have. And if you like videos like this, please give it a thumbs up, because it helps YouTube know that you liked it and to show more people. And so it reaches more of the audience that we want to reach. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, then please do so, and click that little bell notification icon so you'll be notified of all our future videos. And I'm sure, Robyn, we're going to do plenty more of these as well. So stay tuned. And otherwise, thank you again, Robyn, for joining for the second time on the podcast.
Always a pleasure.
And for everyone watching, eat plants, and lots of them. Take care.